The church bells chimed solemnly across the dusty town of Silver Creek as Josephine Matthews stood at the altar, her hands trembling so violently she could barely hold the small bouquet of desert flowers. The year was 1875, and at 19 years of age, she was about to be married to Randall Blackburn, the wealthiest man in the territory and 30 years her senior. The white dress her mother had lovingly sewn felt like a prison shroud as she stared at the wooden floorboards, aware of the hungry eyes of the townsfolk boring into her back. "Dearly beloved," the preacher began, his voice echoing in the small church. Josephine's eyes darted to the entrance, scanning the faces of those gathered. Her father stood stoically in the front pew, his expression grim but determined. The family ranch was failing, and this marriage was his last desperate attempt to save it. Her mother dabbed at tears with a handkerchief, refusing to meet her daughter's pleading gaze. "We are gathered here today." The preacher's words were suddenly drowned out by the thunderous sound of hoofbeats. The church doors burst open, and a figure silhouetted against the bright sunlight made every head turn. The stranger astride a magnificent black stallion was tall and lean, his face partially obscured by the shadow of his hat. Dust from the trail still clung to his clothes, and a gleaming revolver hung at his hip. "This wedding stops now," the man announced, his voice carrying clear and strong through the stunned silence. Randall Blackburn stepped forward, his face contorted with rage. "Who the hell do you think you are? Interrupting my wedding?" The rider dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the wooden floor. He stepped into the light, revealing a handsome, weathered face with piercing blue eyes. Josephine gasped. Samuel Xavier, the man she had secretly loved since childhood, the man who had left town 3 years ago after her father forbade their courtship. "I think I'm the man who's going to stop you from forcing a girl to marry against her will," Samuel replied, his hand hovering near his gun. "This is outrageous," Blackburn spluttered. "Sheriff, arrest this man." The town sheriff shifted uncomfortably but made no move to intervene. Everyone in Silver Creek knew what kind of man Randall Blackburn truly was beneath his veneer of respectability. Samuel's eyes found Josephine's. "Joe, do you want this marriage?" he asked softly, using the nickname only he had ever called her. The church fell silent. Josephine's father stood up, his face flushed with anger. "Now see here, young man, this is a private affair and—" "I'm asking her," Samuel cut him off, his gaze never leaving Josephine's face. Tears welled in her eyes as she slowly shook her head. "No," she whispered, then louder, "No, I don't." Samuel strode forward, ignoring the gasps and murmurs that erupted throughout the congregation. He extended his hand to her. "Then come with me." "You can't do this," Blackburn bellowed, reaching for his own pistol. In a flash, Samuel's gun was drawn, stopping Blackburn mid-motion. "I wouldn't," he warned quietly. Without hesitation, Josephine placed her trembling hand in Samuel's. He pulled her close and swept her into his arms in one swift motion. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she clung to his neck, inhaling the familiar scent of leather, horses, and the open prairie. "You'll regret this, Xavier," Blackburn shouted as Samuel carried Josephine down the aisle. "I'll hunt you both down." Samuel paused at the church doorway, Josephine cradled in his arms. "Try it," he said simply, before stepping out into the bright sunlight. With practiced ease, he lifted her onto his horse, then mounted behind her. his arm wrapped securely around her waist as he urged the stallion forward. They thundered away from the church, the sound of Blackburn's threats and the astonished whispers of the townsfolk fading behind them. "Hold on tight," Samuel murmured against her ear as they galloped out of Silver Creek, the vast expanse of the frontier opening up before them. Josephine clung to the saddle horn, her wedding dress billowing around them like a cloud. Tears streamed down her face, not of sorrow, but of overwhelming relief and a joy she had thought forever lost to her. The bells of the church continued their mournful tolling, growing fainter as they rode deeper into the wilderness. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice nearly lost in the wind. "Somewhere safe," Samuel promised. "Somewhere he can't find us." They rode hard for hours, the landscape changing from the familiar rolling hills near Silver Creek to rugged terrain that Josephine had never seen. The sun began its descent, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple as Samuel finally slowed their pace. "There's a cabin up ahead," he explained, guiding the horse through a narrow pass between towering rock formations. "An old friend of mine uses it during hunting season. We can rest there tonight." The cabin was small but sturdy, nestled in a grove of pines with a clear stream running nearby. Samuel helped Josephine dismount, her legs wobbly from the long ride. Her once pristine wedding dress was now dusty and torn at the hem. "Thank you," she said softly as he led her to the cabin door. "But Samuel, what made you come back after all this time?" He turned to her, his expression serious. "I never really left, Joe. Not in my heart." He pushed open the door and checked inside before leading her in. "I've been working cattle drives, saving every penny. I came back to ask you to come with me to California to start fresh. When I rode into town this morning and heard the bells, heard you were being married to that monster." Josephine reached out, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "You came for me." "I'll always come for you," he said simply, capturing her hand in his. The cabin was sparse but clean, with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, and a narrow bed in the corner. Samuel busied himself lighting a fire, while Josephine stood awkwardly in her ruined wedding dress. "I have some spare clothes in my saddlebag," Samuel offered, noting her discomfort. "They'll be too big, but better than that dress, I reckon." Josephine nodded gratefully. While Samuel tended to his horse outside, she changed into the offered shirt and trousers, rolling up the sleeves and pant legs to make them fit. She washed her face in a basin of water and unbraided her hair, letting the long auburn waves fall loose down her back. When Samuel returned, he stopped in the doorway, staring at her with an expression that made her cheeks flush. "You look like a proper frontier woman now," he said with a smile, setting down his saddlebags. "I feel like one," she replied, surprising herself with the truth of it. The constricting corset and layers of her wedding dress had been replaced by the simple comfort of Samuel's clothes, and with it came a sense of freedom she had never known. As night fell, they shared a modest meal of jerky and biscuits from Samuel's provisions. Sitting across from him at the small table, Josephine finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind. "What happens now? Blackburn won't just let this go. And my father." Her voice trailed off. Thinking of the consequences of her actions, Samuel's expression grew serious. "I won't lie to you, Joe. It won't be easy. Blackburn has money and influence. Your father made a deal with him, and they'll both be looking for us." He reached across the table and took her hand. "But I've been planning this for months. I have a friend with a wagon train leaving for California in 3 days. If we can reach Fort Collins by then, we can join them. California, Josephine whispered, trying to imagine a place she'd only heard stories about. Is it really as beautiful as they say? More beautiful, Samuel assured her, and more importantly, it's a place where we can start fresh. No Blackburn, no debts, no arranged marriages. He hesitated, then added softly, "That is if you want to come with me." Josephine looked up at him, seeing the uncertainty in his eyes. "You came back for me, risked your life to save me from that marriage, and you still don't know if I want to go with you?" A slow smile spread across his face. "Well, I did kind of kidnap you from your own wedding. Figured I should at least give you a choice now." She laughed then, the sound bright in the small cabin. "Samuel Xavier, I have loved you since I was 14 years old, watching you break horses on my father's ranch. Of course I want to go with you." The relief on his face was palpable. He stood, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. "I've missed you every day for 3 years," he murmured, his forehead resting against hers. "Then you have 3 years of missing me to make up for," she whispered back. His kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as though he couldn't quite believe she was really there. Then, as her arms wound around his neck, it deepened into something that spoke of longing and promises and a future they would build together. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance, reminding them of the wilderness surrounding their small haven. Samuel reluctantly broke the kiss, his eyes dark with emotion. "We should get some rest," he said, his voice rough. "We've got a long ride ahead of us tomorrow." Josephine nodded, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. The events of the day, the wedding she had dreaded, the dramatic rescue, the long ride had drained her completely. "I'll take the floor," Samuel said, gesturing to the narrow bed. "Don't be ridiculous," Josephine replied, summoning a courage she didn't know she possessed. "We're both adults. The bed is small, but we can share it." A slow smile spread across his face. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," she said firmly, though her cheeks flushed. "Just to sleep," she added quickly. "I'm not. That is, we're not." Samuel gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I respect you too much to assume anything else, Joe. When we're properly married, then things will be different." Her heart skipped at his words. "Is that a proposal, Mr. Xavier?" "More of a promise," he replied with a grin. "I'll do the proposing properly once we're safe in California." They settled onto the narrow bed, Samuel's arm around her waist, her head resting on his chest. Despite the danger that surely awaited them, Josephine felt safer than she ever had before. The steady beat of Samuel's heart beneath her ear lulled her toward sleep. "I've dreamed of holding you like this," he murmured into her hair. "Was it worth the wait?" she asked sleepily. "Every second," he assured her, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. As she drifted off to sleep, Josephine knew that whatever dangers lay ahead, whatever hardships they might face, being with Samuel made it all worthwhile. Dawn broke with golden light filtering through the cabin's single window. Josephine awoke to find herself still nestled in Samuel's arms, his breathing deep and even. For a moment she simply watched him sleep, memorizing the contours of his face, the dark sweep of his lashes against his cheeks. A noise outside jerked her fully awake, the unmistakable sound of approaching horses. "Samuel," she whispered urgently, shaking him. "Someone's coming." He was instantly alert, reaching for his gun as he moved to the window. Peering through the dirty glass, his expression hardened. "4 riders," he said grimly, "and one of them is Blackburn." Josephine's blood ran cold. How did they find us so quickly? Doesn't matter now, Samuel replied, checking his pistol. We need to move. There's a back way out through the trees. If we can reach the ravine beyond, we might lose them in the rocks. They worked quickly, gathering their few possessions. Samuel saddled his horse while Josephine filled canteens from the stream. They had barely finished when a voice called out from the clearing in front of the cabin. Xavier, we know you're in there. Send the girl out, and maybe we won't kill you. Samuel's jaw tightened. That's Blackburn's foreman, Miller, mean son of a gun. He turned to Josephine. Stay low and head for the trees. I'll be right behind you. I'm not leaving without you, she insisted. Before he could argue, the sharp crack of a rifle shot split the air. The bullet splintered the cabin's door frame. That was your warning, Miller shouted. Next one goes through your head. Samuel pulled Josephine down behind the back wall of the cabin. New plan, he muttered. I'll create a distraction. When I do, you take my horse and ride hard for the ravine. Follow it north until you reach a fork, then go east. There's a trapper's camp about 10 miles up, a man named Jenkins. He's a friend. He'll help you. I'm not leaving you, she repeated fiercely. Joe, please. His eyes locked with hers, pleading. I can't bear the thought of you back in Blackburn's clutches. If anything happened to you. And I can't bear the thought of you dead, she countered. We go together or not at all. A tense moment passed between them, then Samuel nodded reluctantly. Together then. But you do exactly as I say, understood? Another shot rang out, this one punching through the cabin's thin wall, sending splinters flying. They were running out of time. Samuel crept to the corner of the cabin, peering carefully around. They're spread out in front of the cabin, 2 on horseback, 2 on foot. He turned back to her, his expression grim but determined. I'm going to fire at them from here, then make a run for that fallen log to the left. When they focus on me, you head for the horse. Stay low. I'll cover you, then join you. Josephine nodded, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he must hear it. Samuel squeezed her hand once, then raised his pistol and fired 3 quick shots toward the front of the cabin. Shouts and the thunderous return of gunfire erupted as Samuel darted from their cover, rolling behind the massive fallen tree. He fired again, and Josephine heard a man cry out in pain. Now, Joe, Samuel called. Taking a deep breath, Josephine ran in a crouch toward his horse, which was tethered at the edge of the trees. She had almost reached it when a bullet kicked up dirt at her feet. She stumbled but kept going, untying the horse with trembling fingers. More gunfire erupted from where Samuel was positioned, and she used the opportunity to swing herself up onto the saddle. She turned the horse toward Samuel's position, determined not to leave without him. Go, he shouted, firing again. I'll be right behind you. Not without you, she called back stubbornly, urging the horse closer to his position. Just then, a bullet struck the log where Samuel was sheltered, sending wood chips flying. He ducked, then made a desperate dash toward her. Another shot rang out, and he stumbled, clutching his arm, but kept running. Josephine leaned down, extending her hand. With a final burst of speed, Samuel reached her, gripping her arm and swinging up behind her on the horse. She could feel the warm wetness of blood soaking through his shirt sleeve as his arm wrapped around her waist. Ride, he urged, and she needed no further encouragement. They galloped into the trees as bullets whizzed past them, the shouts of their pursuers growing more distant as the dense forest swallowed them. Josephine guided the horse as Samuel had instructed, toward the ravine and along its winding path. "Are you badly hurt?" she asked over her shoulder, fear evident in her voice. "Just a graze," he assured her, though the tightness in his voice suggested it was more painful than he was admitting. "Keep going. They'll be right behind us." They rode hard for hours, following the ravine's path through increasingly rugged terrain. The horse was tiring, struggling on the steep inclines. Behind them, they could occasionally hear distant hoofbeats as their pursuers doggedly maintained the chase. By midday, they reached the fork Samuel had mentioned. Taking the eastern path, they pushed on, though at a slower pace to spare the exhausted horse. "How much farther to this trapper's camp?" Josephine asked, concern growing as she felt Samuel's grip on her waist weakening. "Not far now," he mumbled, his voice alarmingly faint. Glancing back, Josephine saw that his face was pale, his eyes unfocused. The graze on his arm was clearly more serious than he had claimed. The entire side of his shirt was soaked with blood, and he swayed precariously in the saddle. "Samuel, you need to rest," she insisted, slowing the horse to a stop in a small clearing. "Let me look at your arm." He didn't protest as she helped him dismount, a worrying sign in itself. He slumped against a boulder as she gently rolled up his sleeve to examine the wound. She gasped at what she saw. The bullet had torn a deep furrow along his upper arm, and the wound was angry and bleeding freely. "It's not so bad," he tried to assure her, but his words were slurred. "Don't lie to me," she scolded, tearing a strip from the hem of her borrowed shirt to create a bandage. "You've lost too much blood." Using water from their canteen, she cleaned the wound as best she could, then bound it tightly to stem the bleeding. Samuel watched her work, a mixture of pain and admiration in his eyes. "Where did you learn to do that?" he asked weakly. "Growing up on a ranch, you learn a few things about injuries," she replied, tying off the bandage. "My mother taught me, said a woman should know how to tend wounds in this country." "Smart woman, your mother," Samuel murmured, his eyes drifting closed. "Samuel," Josephine patted his cheek, fear gripping her heart. "You have to stay awake. We need to keep moving." His eyes fluttered open. "Just need a minute." The distant sound of hoofbeats made her blood run cold. Their pursuers were getting closer. "We don't have a minute," she said urgently, helping him to his feet. "Come on, you need to get back on the horse." With considerable effort, she managed to help him mount, then climbed up in front of him. His arms encircled her waist, but his grip was alarmingly weak. "Just hold on to me," she instructed, guiding his arms tighter around her. "I'll get us there." They continued along the ravine, the terrain growing increasingly difficult. Josephine found herself praying for Samuel's strength, for their pursuers to give up, for the trappers' camp to appear around the next bend. Behind her, Samuel drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally mumbling incoherently against her shoulder. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the rocky landscape, Josephine's hopes began to fade. The horse was near exhaustion, and Samuel's condition was deteriorating rapidly. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm her, she rounded a bend in the ravine and spotted a thin curl of smoke rising above the trees ahead. "Samuel," she said urgently, shaking him gently, "I think I see the camp. We're almost there." He stirred against her back, his voice barely audible. "Knew you'd get us there." The camp consisted of a small log cabin and a few outbuildings nestled in a protected valley. As they approached, a bearded man emerged from the cabin, a rifle in his hands. "That's far enough," he called, raising the weapon. "State your business." "Please," Josephine called back desperately. "Are you Jenkins? Samuel Xavier said you would help us. He's hurt badly." At the mention of Samuel's name, the man lowered his rifle slightly. "Xavier? That really him with you?" "Yes, and he's been shot. Please, he's lost a lot of blood." Jenkins approached cautiously, his weathered face creased with concern as he took in Samuel's slumped form. "Damn," he muttered. "Bring him in, quick." With Jenkins' help, Josephine managed to get Samuel into the cabin and onto a narrow cot. The trapper examined the wound, his expression grave. "Bullet's gone through, which is good, but it's deep and he's lost a lot of blood," he explained, gathering supplies from a trunk. "I've seen worse, though. We'll clean it proper and stitch it up. He's a strong one, your man." "He's not my—" Josephine began automatically, then stopped herself. "Yes, he is. He is my man." Jenkins smiled knowingly as he set a kettle to boil. Figured as much. Xavier never was one to risk his neck unless his heart was involved. He handed her a pile of clean cloths. "Hold these ready. This is going to hurt him something fierce, but it needs doing." The next hour was one of the most difficult of Josephine's life. Samuel regained consciousness as Jenkins began cleaning the wound, his eyes wide with pain, his jaw clenched to keep from crying out. She held his hand, whispering words of comfort as the trapper worked. "Almost done," Jenkins assured them both as he prepared to stitch the wound. "Miss, you might want to look away for this part." "I'm staying right here," Josephine replied firmly, meeting Samuel's pain-filled gaze. "I'm not going anywhere." By the time Jenkins finished, Samuel had passed out again, but his breathing was steady. The trapper covered him with a blanket, then gestured for Josephine to join him by the fire. "He'll sleep now," Jenkins said, pouring her a cup of strong coffee. "Best thing for him. You look like you could use some rest yourself." Josephine accepted the coffee gratefully, realizing for the first time how exhausted she truly was. "Thank you for helping us. Samuel said you were a friend." "Known him since he was just a pup trailing after his pa on cattle drives," Jenkins replied, settling into a chair across from her. "Good man, Xavier. Too good for the trouble he usually finds himself in." He gave her a curious look. "Speaking of trouble, mind telling me why you two came tearing in here with bullet holes and the look of people being chased?" Josephine hesitated, unsure how much to reveal, but something in Jenkins's steady gaze convinced her to trust him. She told him everything: the arranged marriage to Blackburn, Samuel's dramatic rescue, their flight, and the pursuit. Jenkins whistled low when she finished. "Randall Blackburn, that's a powerful enemy to make. Man's got fingers in every pie from here to Denver." "Will you turn us in?" Josephine asked, suddenly fearful. The trapper looked offended. "Girl, I may be a lot of things, but I ain't no traitor to my friends. Besides, I've had my own run-ins with Blackburn's type before. No, you're safe here for now." He glanced toward the darkened window. "But they'll be searching these mountains come morning, no doubt about that." "What should we do?" Josephine asked, desperation creeping into her voice. Jenkins stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Xavier mentioned Fort Collins, that wagon train to California." She nodded, surprised. "You know about that?" "It's my business to know what moves through these mountains," he replied with a shrug. "The train leaves day after tomorrow. If Xavier can travel by then, I might be able to help you reach it." He eyed her speculatively. "You sure about California, girl? It's a long way from everything you know." Josephine's gaze drifted to Samuel's sleeping form. "I'm sure about him," she said simply. "The rest will sort itself out." Jenkins nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer. Get some rest. You can take the other cot. I'll keep watch tonight, just in case your friends decide to come calling. Exhausted beyond measure, Josephine gratefully accepted the offer. She checked on Samuel one more time, relieved to find his forehead cool to the touch and his breathing steady. Settling onto the narrow cot Jenkins had indicated, she was asleep almost before her head touched the pillow. She awoke to sunlight streaming through the cabin's small window and the smell of coffee and frying bacon. For a moment, disorientation gripped her, then the events of the previous day came flooding back. She sat up quickly, looking for Samuel. To her immense relief, he was awake, propped up on his cot, pale but alert. Their eyes met across the small cabin, and the smile that spread across his face warmed her to her core. "Morning, Sleeping Beauty," he said, his voice weak but teasing. "Samuel," she breathed, crossing to his side and taking his hand. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been kicked by a particularly angry mule," he admitted with a grimace. "But I'll live, thanks to you." "Thanks to Jenkins," she corrected, glancing toward the fire where the trapper was cooking breakfast. "Don't sell yourself short, miss," Jenkins called over his shoulder. "You got him here. I just patched him up." Samuel squeezed her hand. "He's right. You saved my life, Joe." "Well, you saved me first," she replied with a small smile. "I was just returning the favor." Their moment was interrupted by a sharp knock at the cabin door. Jenkins instantly reached for his rifle, gesturing for them to be quiet. "Who's there?" he called, moving to position himself between the door and his guests. "Jenkins, it's Marshal Davis from Silver Creek. Open up." Josephine's heart sank. The town marshal had found them. Jenkins gave them a reassuring nod. "Stay calm," he mouthed, then louder, "Just a minute, Marshal." He opened the door a crack, keeping his rifle visible. "What brings you all the way up here, Marshal?" "Looking for 2 fugitives," came the reply. "Young woman in a wedding dress and a cowboy named Xavier. Kidnapping and attempted murder charges. Blackburn says they headed this way." "Attempted murder?" Josephine whispered incredulously to Samuel, who looked equally shocked. Jenkins played his part perfectly, scratching his beard thoughtfully. "Ain't seen nobody in a wedding dress. Got a wounded trapper inside I'm tending to. Shot himself accidentally while checking his lines. You're welcome to look, but I'd appreciate it if you'd be quick. Man needs his rest." There was a pause. Then the marshal said, "No need. If you see anything suspicious, you send word to Silver Creek, you hear? Blackburn's offering a substantial reward." "I'll keep that in mind," Jenkins replied neutrally. They listened as the marshal's horse moved away from the cabin, and Jenkins waited a full 5 minutes before returning to them. "He's gone, but that was too close," the trapper said grimly. "And he won't be the only one searching. We need to get you 2 out of here today." "I can ride," Samuel insisted, attempting to sit up further and wincing at the effort. "You can barely sit up," Josephine countered worriedly. "I've got a better idea," Jenkins said, returning to his cooking. "Eat first, then we'll talk." Over a hearty breakfast of bacon, beans, and biscuits, Jenkins outlined his plan. He had a small wagon he used for transporting furs. They would hide in the back beneath a covering of pelts, and he would drive them to a point just outside Fort Collins where the wagon train was gathering. "Marshall won't look twice at an old trapper bringing furs to market," he explained, "and Blackburn's men will be searching the trails, not the main roads." "It could work," Samuel agreed, looking better after getting some food in him. "It has to work," Josephine said quietly. We have no other choice." They spent the day preparing. Jenkins helped Samuel change his bandages and provided them both with fresh clothes. He packed supplies for their journey: food, water, an extra pistol, and a small pouch of coins that he pressed into Samuel's hand, despite his protests. "Consider it an investment," the trapper insisted. "You can pay me back when you strike it rich in California." By late afternoon, the wagon was loaded. Jenkins had created a concealed space beneath the firs where Josephine and Samuel could lie hidden, but still have air to breathe. It would be cramped and uncomfortable, especially for Samuel with his injury, but it was their best chance. As they prepared to leave, Josephine took a moment alone with Samuel, who was looking pale again after the exertion of getting ready. "Are you sure you're strong enough for this?" she asked worriedly, helping him settle into their hiding place. He reached up to touch her cheek gently. "I'd crawl to California on my hands and knees if it meant being with you, Joe." Her heart swelled at his words. She leaned down and kissed him softly. "I love you, Samuel Xavier. I always have." "And I love you, Josephine Matthews," he replied, his eyes shining. "Always have. Always will." Jenkins cleared his throat from outside the wagon. "Time to go, lovebirds. Sun's getting low." With a final kiss, Josephine settled in beside Samuel in their cramped hiding place. Jenkins carefully arranged the furs over them, creating the illusion of a simple load of pelts. "Stay quiet, no matter what happens," the trapper instructed. "Even if you hear voices, I'll get you there safe." The journey was long and arduous. For hours they jolted along rough roads, trying to remain silent and still beneath the heavy firs. The air was stuffy and hot, and Josephine worried constantly about Samuel's wound reopening. Occasionally, they heard Jenkins speaking to people they passed on the road, his casual, friendly tone betraying nothing of his secret cargo. Once, they heard the distinctive voice of Blackburn's foreman, Miller, questioning Jenkins about suspicious travelers. Josephine held her breath, her hand finding Samuel's in the darkness, but Jenkins handled the encounter with the same easy nonchalance he had shown the marshal. By the time the wagon finally came to a stop, night had fallen. Jenkins lifted the corner of their covering. "We're just outside Fort Collins," he whispered. "Wagon trains camped about half a mile ahead. I can see their fires. Wait here while I scout ahead." The minutes stretched into what felt like hours as they waited for his return. Samuel's breathing had grown labored again, and Josephine could feel heat radiating from his skin, signs of a fever developing. Finally, Jenkins returned. "Coast is clear. Trains loading up to leave at first light. Leader's an old friend told him your situation. He's willing to take you on. No questions asked." With Jenkins's help, they emerged from their hiding place, Samuel leaning heavily on both of them. Under the cover of darkness, they made their way toward the distant glow of campfires. As they approached, a tall figure stepped out to meet them. "Jenkins, you old scoundrel," the man greeted them in a hushed voice. "These your friends?" "Thomas Ford, meet Samuel Xavier and Josephine Matthews," Jenkins introduced them. "Samuel's been shot, needs tending." Ford nodded gravely. "My wife was a nurse during the war. She'll look after him." He eyed Josephine curiously. "Blackburn's intended bride, eh? Man's put out quite a reward for your return." Josephine tensed, but Ford waved away her concern. "Don't worry, I've got no love for Blackburn or his kind. You'll be safe with us." He led them to a wagon at the edge of the circle, where a kind-faced woman waited. She helped Samuel inside without asking questions, immediately setting to work examining his wound. "The fever's concerning," she told Josephine after her examination, "but the wound itself looks clean. With proper rest and care, he should recover fully." "Thank you," Josephine whispered, overwhelmed by the kindness of these strangers. Outside the wagon, Jenkins prepared to leave. Josephine embraced him tearfully. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "Live a good life," the trapper replied gruffly. "That'll be thanks enough." He turned to Samuel, who had insisted on coming outside to say goodbye. "Take care of each other. California's a wild place, but good for those willing to work hard." "We will," Samuel promised, clasping the man's hand. "I owe you a debt I can never repay." "Nonsense," Jenkins replied with a smile. "Just name your first son after me." With a final wave, the trapper disappeared into the darkness, leaving them with their new companions. Over the next 2 days, as the wagon train began its long journey westward, Josephine rarely left Samuel's side. His fever broke on the second night, and strength gradually returned to his limbs. By the end of the first week, he was able to sit outside their wagon during rest periods, watching the vast landscape roll by. "It's really happening," Josephine said one evening as they sat together, watching the sunset paint the prairie in gold and crimson. "We're going to California." Samuel took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "Are you scared?" She considered the question seriously. "A little," she admitted, "but mostly I'm excited. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing my own path." "Our path," he corrected gently. "Yes," she agreed with a smile. "Our path." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "I've been carrying this since I left Silver Creek 3 years ago. Bought it with my first earnings, thinking maybe someday." He looked at her earnestly. "I know we're not in California yet, and I don't have much to offer you right now except hard work and all the love in my heart. But Josephine Matthews, will you marry me? Not because your father arranged it or because society expects it, but because you choose to." Tears welled in Josephine's eyes as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered, 1,000 times yes. 2 months later, as the wagon train reached the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains, Josephine and Samuel were married under a canopy of towering pines. Thomas Ford, who had been appointed a justice of the peace back in Missouri, performed the ceremony while the entire wagon train looked on. Josephine wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Ford had helped her sew, with wildflowers woven into her hair. Samuel, fully recovered from his wound, stood tall and proud in a new shirt, the gold of his wedding band matching the one he slipped onto her finger. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Ford declared, and this time, when bells rang, small brass bells that the children of the wagon train had decorated and tied to the branches above, Josephine didn't tremble with fear but with joy. As Samuel kissed her, cheers erupted from their newfound friends and family. In that moment, Josephine knew that the forced bride she had once been was gone forever, replaced by a woman who had chosen her own destiny, her own love, and her own freedom. 1 year later, in a small but thriving homestead nestled in a fertile California valley, Josephine Xavier cradled her newborn son in her arms while her husband looked on with pride and wonder. "Jenkins Xavier," Samuel murmured, gently touching his son's tiny hand. "It has a certain ring to it, doesn't it?" Josephine smiled up at the man she loved, surrounded by the home they had built together. "It's perfect," she agreed, "just like everything else." And as the California sunset painted their world in gold, Josephine thought of church bells and wedding dresses, of desperate rides and loyal friends, of fear transformed into courage and dreams transformed into reality. The journey had been dangerous, the cost high, but the reward, this life, this love, this freedom, had been worth every moment.